Hello, welcome to the May 19th, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner, and let me just go ahead and mute on my monitoring computer. Hang on just one second. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can see my audio is coming through as expected. So you've not attended a live stream, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field, or simply just hang on just one second, sorry. Or you could send them in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize my ability to answer questions as they come in real time will soon be eclipsed, so I may be behind the actual questions, so it won't be kind of a real time, but I will try my best to go through all of the questions in chronological order as they come in. So if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase it is, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version, so if it's 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, and which operating system you're running, that information is always helpful. We should have a index of all the topics discussed in tonight's live stream available, and it will be at the top of the comments field pinned with timestamps, so you could go through and find all of the topics that have been covered in the live stream today and navigate quickly to them. If you want to go to previous live streams and search for topics, we've covered over 25,000 different topics. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan for creating that website from Stockholm. And we also want to give special thanks out to our two moderators, to Jazz Dude and to Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees, they just do it to make it a better community. So we want to give special thanks to them. Another wonderful resource of information that Jazz Dude does a lot of work for is also the Cubase Nation Discord, so make sure you sign up for that. It's an invaluable resource of data for the Steinberg community. So special thanks again to Jazz Dude for all of his efforts with that. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. With that, we will go ahead and start through questions. All right, we see Peter from Montreal on. It's great to see you. We have Tony Hudspeth just asked, hi Greg, how are you? I hope you're well. So I'm doing great, thank you. Great to be on the live stream. Looking forward to doing it today. All right. The Heartbreak Time Machine says, why does factory content for Hallian come up as HSSE edition in the VST itself? Could these be named better? So these will be just different libraries. So let's say if we come over here to our VST instruments and we go to Hallian Sonic SE. So when we go through, we'll just say, okay, so as we come over here into our different libraries, each of these will be named based on the actual library that, so some of those libraries were actually just done directly from earlier versions. So that's why you see the Hallian Sonic SE just recently that had been kind of renamed to Hallian Sonic. So with release of Hallian 7. So if we come over to Hallian Sonic here and we go to load, we can see all of our different libraries. So we'll see that, when we have the Hallian Sonic, so we can think of this as a Hallian Sonic Starter Edition. So just until 2 months ago or so, this would be content that comes with the various levels of Cubase. So, and for compatibility, just because we have updated the player, and the player will load with all of the projects that refer to Hallian Sonic SE. We wanted to make sure that this had continuity back in, so that if you're looking for particular sounds, you knew which folder to go searching for. So that's what it stands for, the Hallian Sonic SE Artists. So instead of having all that written out, we could do that. So so it is, because this content is still available in Hallian Sonic and originated there in the Hallian Sonic SE, and that's why it kind of retains kind of the legacy naming. But I'll pass that along as a point to the team. All right, so we have the Heartbreak Time Machine. Also asks, when using time warp to align measures, how does Cubase choose where to add a tempo change point? Arranger track, selection area, nearest clip. So as we're doing kind of a time warp, when it does it, it's where you actually place the bar. So let's go ahead and just take a quick look. So let's say if I was doing a quick time warp on this project. So say we have just kind of a 2-track mix, and I want to bring this down volume-wise. So let's say we don't know what the tempo is. So we can say, okay, this is where, so I'm going to open up the tempo track. Okay, so as we come over, we'll adjust our tempo track here. So we're going to put this into our warp grid. So as we do this, I can say, okay, this is going to be, we'll just listen to. So we say, okay, this is where measure 2 starts. So as wherever I place measure 2, it'll just automatically, and I'll just kind of hide this. So, and then what I'm going to do here is move measure 3. So wherever I move measure 3 to, wherever that lands is where the tempo value will be placed. And let me just put on the follow here. So you could just kind of come here. So wherever you actually move the measure, that's where, so it's going to be tied to the measure, and as we move the measure, the tempo will adjust accordingly, just to kind of fit right in with that particular setting right there. So it's based, right where measure 4 is, that's where it'll be. And if you wanted to go and adjust down to the bar as we adjust the beat here, we could now do it by measure or by beat. And as we make the adjustment here, as we move measure 3, as it's moved, the tempo is automatically calculated to show that. So it's not necessarily tied to the event, but directly with the grid line of the measure as it's moved, or the time placement. Okay, so we have Arnold checking in. We have Uno Memento checking in from a sunny Finland. We see Jazz Dude on as well. And we see Jan from Cubase Index. All right, so we have music for World Peace Record, Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Thanks for being on. All right, we have Masta LBC, just telling all the peeps to have fun. See Jan from Cubase Index giving kudos to Jazz Dude for his for the Cubase Nation Discord. All right, and we have Mark Isper, who's happy that we're starting live. All right, so we see Dallas LaRue just says, when using tempo detection, do you ever use it in a musical mode? When to divide by 2, and can the tempo detection track be deleted and have the results remain the same? Okay, so let's say if I was taking this particular track. So usually you don't want it to be in musical mode because we don't want the events to change based on the tempo. So we would probably want to select the event and make sure that it's not in musical mode, because otherwise, as it changes, as we do a tempo detection, the pitch and the timing of the event can change. So often when we're doing a tempo detection, we want to figure out what the tempo is of this and keep this source file the same way. So hence, that's why you generally don't place it into musical mode, or make sure it's not in musical mode before doing a tempo detection. So let's say if we do a tempo detection, so we'll just come right over here, say project tempo detection, and we'll analyze. All right, so say as we're listening to it, we'll just say, now, sometimes you may notice that it may detect it in like halftime or double time. So you say, okay, let's multiply by 2. So if that was what the feel of it was, that's when you could do it. And then if you're in, dealing with triplets, or if you were in 3/4 time and wanted to go to 4/4 time, depending on that, that's when you could multiply by like the 4/3 and 3/4. So, you just kind of listen to the results, because sometimes depending on the material, let's say if there's not a lot of transients, it may actually determine the tempo to be, half of what it normally would be with something that has pretty steady rhythmic tendencies like drums in the project. So, depending on the material, if you notice that, okay, it's detected it, twice as fast as what I think the beats are, then you could divide by 2. If it's half as fast, then multiply by 2, and then it will automatically accommodate those different changes as needed. All right, great to see Parabot on. Okay, and the last part of the question, and can the tempo detection track be deleted and have the results remain the same? So the audio file, so if we delete the tempo here, the audio file is going to play back, but its timing and its reference to the timing grid won't be there. So you could delete it and start all over again. So, the audio file will play back, but other MIDI tracks will probably not synchronize. The grid won't be aligned to the project, and that's what the tempo detection is doing, is it's aligning the grid to the particular project. Great to see you on the live stream, Dallas. All right, we see Captenergy Music on as well. All right, we have Rick Ballantyne on from Charlotte. Great to see you on. And he's on for tips while rendering film cues. Rick is a very incredibly talented composer, so we're glad you can make it today. All right, we have Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. See, Captenergy Music says, wow, 25,000 questions. That's a huge library. It is, and we want to thank Jan for compiling it all for us. It's a really long Word file, so it's like 500 pages or so. All right, so we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. We have the keyboard saying hello. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so Mazda LBC asks, hi Greg, in 12, how to set up an external Yamaha USB MIDI instrument with multiple outputs and USB MIDI connection. So what you would want to do is generally, you need to set up, if you have multiple outputs in the instrument, you would need to set up multiple external instruments. But to get that set up, we would go to your studio menu, and this is in Cubase Pro. You go to your audio connections, and if you have external instruments, let's say, okay, I have a motif, or let's say I update it to a montage. All right, so, and now what I need to do is to find available inputs on my audio interface. So if you have 6 outputs of your Yamaha keyboard, you could set up montage 1, montage 2, montage 3, etc., and then just tell it what actual connections that they are connected to. So if everything is going out of one stereo output, you could just come right over there and be able to, do the mixing inside of the keyboard and capture it. Or if you wanted to split it out, however many outputs you have, you could set up multiple VST instruments for different inputs on your system. Then all we would have to do is get to your add track, and let's get to instrument, and we would say external instrument, and I want this to go to, let's say, our motif. And then as we do this, set the MIDI input, and at that point it will send the MIDI directly out, and then you could just treat it very much like a virtual instrument. You could have gain directly there. All right, so we have John Barry checking in from Old England, where it's a very nice 19 degrees there. Sounds really cold in America, but it's probably 60 or so, around 60, 62, something like that. All right, wonderful to see Trond from Norway back on the live stream. Glad you can make it today. All right, Nathaniel Walker says, is Cubase Nation Discord an official thing? So it's not officially done by Steinberg, but, it is, it's not an official Steinberg thing where Steinberg doesn't have a particular, Steinberg doesn't run it, they don't curate it. So it's not officially Steinberg, so that's why it's always kind of the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So, but still, it's a wonderful resource of information. All right, and we have Benny from Sweden also checking in. Thanks for joining us. All right, Derek Marshall asks, I've been working on my first Atmos mix in Cubase 12 Pro, and I'm very confused about how to manage / shape the overall loudness of the track. Do you have some advice? So it's basically just going to be, like some, basic gain structures. There's nothing, really, so it could depend on, if you are monitoring it with in Atmos, or if you're rendering it with 12 speakers versus rendering it with binaural. But you should get kind of a sense. So let me just think. I have a quick project here that we might be able to show. So let's say it will. So let's say if we're once we have our Atmos mix in, let's say if we're rendering it in binaural, you should get kind of a good idea of the gain structure going on directly here in the, right when you're in the renderer page. So you should see, and if all these were, gain structured down, we would see that kind of reflected there. So it's going to really kind of mimic typical gain structure. So, but you could kind of look at what the renderer is doing there. And also, if you could let us know if you are, sending it as an ADM file, but, here's where is a good resource for monitoring the typical gain for an Atmos project. All right, so Captenergy Music just says, hope you're doing awesome, Greg. So, yeah, I'm doing very well. Looking forward to a nice, relaxing weekend. All right, so you see from the Heartbreak Time Machines just saying, regarding Time Warp, thank you, it finally clicked. So, yeah. All right, we have a question from Benny. He says, I get a click of sound every now and then when I record vocals. I have updated the sound card and restarted the computer. Have you ever experienced it? Cubase 12 Pro / Win 10. So sometimes, it could be an interruption. Clicks could be caused by maybe something like the real-time audio performance being interrupted That's one source of a click. If it's like a performance click, sometimes it could also be, clicks could also be as you do an edit. That, make sure that if you do edits that you have snap to zero crossing enabled. And what that's going to allow you to do is to, as we make a particular cut in a file, so let's say if we zoom in here and I'm going to take my snap off and I try to cut right at this point, it's going to only allow you to cut at the particular, so I can't cut at that point. If I have zero crossing turned off, I can make a cut anywhere, but with zero crossing, so if there's any edits, make sure that you have the edit on zero crossing. And another thing that could also help, I'm not sure if it's at the beginning of the file as it plays back or if it's at the end, but you could click right here and there's an auto fade setting. So you could just say do an auto fade in and fade out, so that anytime an audio file plays in this track, that it will do a short fade in and fade out. Sometimes, if you start to play back, and these are on playback only, so it's not actually written into the file, but if you start playing back in the middle and not at a zero crossing, you might hear a pop or click depending on that as well. So those are a couple things that could, and see if you actually see the click in the waveform. If you don't see the click in the waveform and if just kind of randomly showing up, it could also be like a sign that a digital audio clock is out of sync as well. So check to see if it's actually in the file, if it's when you play from a particular point, or if it's, if maybe clocking is set up. Like if you're kind of consistent clicks and pops, it could be that the audio interface is not clocking correctly if you're using external clocks, for instance. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us today. Always great to see John on. Yeah, and we see Benny, or Heartbreak Time Machine says, Benny, yes, but in my case, it turned out to be an electrical issue at my fuse box and not Cubase/audio interface. I'll tell you an interesting click story. One time, Donny Osmond called me up and said he was having intermittent clicks and pops. And we're going maybe an hour and a half trying all sorts of clocking scenarios. And I remember him at the very beginning, it was like in December, and he lives in Utah, I think in Provo, and he just mentioned that he had a space heater on because his studio was a little cold, so he grabbed his space heater. And I'm just like, after an hour and a half, I was like, why don't you try unplugging the space heater out of curiosity? And he did that, and all the clicks went away. So it could be sometimes odd stuff like that as well. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas, and he's happy that it's Friday. All right, so we see Jovanovic 3D says, I have Nuendo and Cubase 12 Pro license. Could Greg ask Steinberg for the option to trade in this license for Dorco Pro with a discounted price? So usually, throughout various points within the year, I think in March there was a promotion going on in Dorco. So just kind of pay attention. So we'll let you keep both your Cubase and Nuendo license, and you could probably, if you're, keep your eye out, there will be, promotions if you don't want to pay full price for Dorco, but I think it's worth paying full price for anyway. All right, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button, and hitting the like button if you learned a new tip or trick, and subscribing to the channel allows us to continue to do these live streams so that we could empower everyone free. It's good. All right. All right. So we see. Chatfield just jumped. All right, so we have I see a question. This is Vishnu from India. If I had to render different cues at different timestamps in a project, can I use the render cue by selecting P and then one by one? That will all render. So one of the things that you could do, let's say we had this as our project, is you could do this by cycle markers. So let me just open up just a stereo version of this. Okay, so let's say we had like different cues within one project, and we wanted to export. You said you want to render the cue by selecting P and adding one by one. That all will render. So I'm going to come over here. Let's add a marker track, and I want to just add some cycle markers. Okay, so I'll just do. So I'm going to just define, we'll say this is Q1. I'm going to set my cycle. I hit P to set my left and right locators. And we enter a cycle marker. Let's go to do the same thing here. Cycle. I want to have that as a cycle. So we're adding. Just do with the new marker track here real quick. Hang on. Okay, so we're just going to come here. I'm sorry, and add our cycle markers. So we'll click. Okay, so we now have cycle markers added in our project. Okay, so now when I go to export, all I had to do is say, let's go to export audio mixdown, and then we'll see export range. We're going to choose by cycle markers. Okay, so we have 5 cycle markers that we've defined in the project. And let's just do our stereo out, and we're going to create new audio tracks. So let's go to our export audio mixdown. So for each of the defined cycle markers, we can now have our different renders. Our different cues can be exported and just use that based upon the cycle markers. So if we just again come to File, to Export, to Audio Mixdown, just choose instead of export range locators to cycle markers, and then you could export multiple cues, and that will retain all the timestamps as well. So let me know if that works for you, Vishnu. All right, so we have Larry B checking in from Brampton, Ontario. Says thanks for the tempo tips. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so Jazz Dude has received 1 gallon of banana nut ice cream for you. I think that's 2.2 liters. So, all right. All right, so we have Rakesh Sharma just saying super. Thanks for being on. All right. See, Rick, Jazz Dude just saying Rick Ballantyne just got a new subscriber. So yeah, everyone check out Rick's work. He does amazing composition stuff in Cubase. I think he's done the best jazz MIDI sequences that I've ever heard. So if you get a chance to check out his stuff, it's always great. I'm looking forward to the film that he's working on. All right, so we have Kamer237 from Cameroon. Thanks for being on. All right, Tony Hudspeth asks, Cubase Pro 12, is there any way to import my mixing template into projects where the audio is housed? I know I can import mixer channels, but I can't find a way to do it the other way around. Okay. Let me just reread this again. So. Okay, so let's say I have like this mix set up. So I'll just revert this. Okay, so let's say if I have this mix set up, and I'll just say, okay, we'll take this. Okay, so let's say my mix is currently set up like this and this project, and I wanted to get the mix, import the mix. So one of the things that you could do is try just coming here to import tracks from project, and I'm just going to say bicycle. And then what we could do is we could select all of our projects. And we want to select matching tracks, and then we can say let's import the channel and inspector settings. We could import automation if necessary, but I don't want to import the events and parts. So now if I come here, we can say, okay, let's just hit OK, and now all of my mix will be imported directly in. So that will carry over like my mixing template if you wanted to do that. So let me know if that's that's the approach you wanted to do, Tony. See, Robbie Bowling says it's not Cubase related, but he's sick and tired of the AI push by everyone. So it seems like it's a good marketing going on, so that yeah, so I think it's primarily marketing. So all right, so we see from Louis Che, just says, hello, Greg. Can you talk about what is new in Nuendo Live 3 and how to record, if possible, to the internal HD and the external HD simultaneously? So I don't think I have Nuendo Live 3 on here. So, but I know it's under the new Steinberg licensing. It's also going to be Apple M1 native. But let me say I might have Nuendo Live 2 on. Let me just get to applications. Yeah, I'll get Nuendo Live 3 up for. I'll get it for Tuesday's live stream. Okay, so let's so say new project. All right, so if we come, so our record folder, we could set directly there. So I'm not sure. I haven't worked with Nuendo Live too much. I could get the version 3 for Tuesday's live stream. Sorry, just kind of came out in the middle of the NAMM show and I didn't get my version of it. But if you wanted to record on different drives in Nuendo or Cubase, I'll show you a quick trick that you could do. So if you just come over here and let's say we take these tracks and let's just duplicate. I'll put these into, let's say, a folder. So we'll say move selected tracks to folder. And what I want to do is to duplicate this folder. And then I could select all the tracks here within the folder, right click, and then we could choose set record folder. So you could have 2 different record folders and kind of record them both simultaneously. But I'll see if it can be done in Nuendo Live for kind of redundancy. I'll have a license by Tuesday. I'll reach out to Germany and get one. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina, where it's raining. Yeah, I was watching the Weather Channel. Seems like you guys can get a lot of rain near Wilmington. All right, so we have a question. All right, my chat field just jumped. Hi, Greg. Can you attach album artwork to an MP3? So I don't think it's going to be done within Cubase, but let's come over here. I'll just check. I think you could maybe do it inside a Wavelab. But if we come over here, let's say, okay, we go to your MP3, and so I don't think that there is ability to do that, but there's a number of freeware utilities that can do that, but I don't think it's done in done from inside of Cubase. All right, so you see question, what would be the equivalent of the Logic Live Loops Ableton style arranging feature in Cubase using the arranger track? So there's no direct equivalent, but if you wanted to be able to use the arranger track creatively, we could do that as well. So let's come over to, let's see if I will open up this project here. So, what the arranger track's going to allow you to do is to kind of take a traditional linear workflow and apply and be able to work with it in a non-linear way. So, generally when we play a project, it's going to play from left to right. And Cubase pioneered this concept, almost 35, 34 years ago, of being able to have this linear concept. But if we wanted to kind of jump around and have a non-linear, we could add an arranger track. So our arranger track, we could come here, we could define our different parts of a song, we could trigger these from MIDI, and as we play this now, instead of playing straight linearly through, so we see it's going to go on, and instead of continue to go on, we could have it jump to different sections. So after this, it's going to do, and we have nested parts, so we'll have a 1-bar chorus. So this is a way of kind of working in a non-linear fashion, but there isn't kind of like a direct equivalent of, of kind of the Ableton style arranging or live loops. So, but you may be able to kind of, work with this way and be a little more creative and be able to trigger it from MIDI. All right, so we see the Benny's little click says it so strongly in a track, and then it kind of bangs. So usually if it's showing in a track, that might be that the audio interface itself is causing a problem, because usually there's a lot of stuff on playback, but if it's kind of showing, make sure that your clocks are set up correctly with that. Okay, John Barry asks, hi Greg, does the update of VST this week to 3.78 only affect new or updated plugins, or does it have any implications for existing plugins? So it's always, Cubase runs VST2 and VST3 plugins. Won't run VST2 if you're running native on Apple Silicon, but it's not going to have any impact on existing plugins. Just kind of add more capabilities in the future for future development and options and capabilities. We see Michael Teams is on the case with the ice cream distribution. Thank you for that. All right. Sorry, my chat field jumped. So just all right, so Rob from Tarpon Springs, Florida says, how would you move older tracks, audio and or MIDI, from an old backup version into your present Cubase version that you're working on? So if I wanted to add move older tracks, audio or MIDI, from an old backup version. So if you have a backup, so let's say if I wanted to come here, let's just go to import audio file, or we will, one is if you have the backup open, you can just drag and drop directly into the timeline. So that's one method that's pretty common. Another way is just to come over here to go, okay, I want to import not audio file. Let's see if I can make the same mistake 3 times in a row. Let's say import tracks from project. And now you could select a particular project here and say, okay, I want these two. So now I want to create new tracks. You could put it onto particular tracks here, again, hit OK. And those tracks can now be imported. And you could, as you do the import tracks, if you want to come over and say, and why we don't see media is when I go to import tracks from project, I probably just came over here, and you could choose to import the events, and we can say, okay, let's select matching. So I want to import, let's say piano close 1, 2, and we'll just say select matching track and hit OK. And now we can see that those particular tracks from another older or backup project could be just imported using the import tracks from project function. All right, so we have a question. Does Cubase sell Artist 10? So the current version is Cubase 12. So that's the latest version with that. So we generally don't sell previous generations of software. So our Cubase Artist 10 is no longer for sale as a new product, but you may be able to get it from another user or something like that. All right, so we see Rob asks, will the tempo of old versions sync if you have made current changes? So it's not going to automatically sync the temp. Like if I'm here and I've made tempo changes into a project, it's not going to automatically synchronize other projects. So if I've saved the changes in tempo here, so let me just We'll go up to, let's say, our tempo track. So if we do have tempo track data, it's not going to immediately synchronize this. What you can do is choose to export the tempo track and import it into into the other project. But changing a function like a tempo in one project is not going to automatically make that change into all the other projects. You'd have to kind of manually do that. And you could also, so you could export the tempo. So go to File to export the tempo track. You could also go to Import. So we can say Import and import the tempo track, or we can say let's import tracks from project. And as we've done this, if there's a tempo, you could just import the tempo track directly onto so you could import the tempo track from the new changes into other projects, but they're all separate, distinct documents, so they're not going to automatically sync with tempo changes. All right, wonderful to see Nick on from England. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we see, does Cubase sell Artist 10 software on CDs? So I don't think, I think with Cubase 10, they stopped doing media. We had separate versions, box versions that had media, and we would ship it to warehouses, ship it to, ship it from Hamburg to different distribution centers. But most of the people, at that point, no one bought the version. They just wanted to get the download version so they could have immediate access to it. So it's been discontinued, I think, since version 9.5, where there's no physical media. So, but you could download it and then, just simply install it. All right, so the Heartbreak Time Machine says, is it possible to save a track preset that includes multiple tracks, i.e. can I have one track preset that's, say, 3 group tracks and their settings, routings? So you can save tracks with, it's not a track preset, but you could save tracks with routing. So let's say if I wanted to go to here and I have, like, let's say all my drums going to a particular group, and I wanted to save the drums and the group together. So we'll just say, okay, let's add. All right, so now all of my drums, let me just add a group track to the selected tracks this time. All right, so now let's say all of my drums are being routed into this group. And if I wanted to save my drums and that group as a collective entity, what I could do is come over here and go to Export, Selected Tracks. All right, and I'll just reference the media files. We could copy them if necessary. So we say, so we're going to export the selected tracks. So I selected the group and the audio tracks that were routed to it. Let's do a new project. And now I want to import a track archive. So we'll come, so we export selected tracks, we import a track archive, and this is our track archive. I'll now hit open. We'll select all, so it's very similar to the import tracks from project. And now as we come here, all of my tracks are now still routed out to the group. So that way we could preserve the routing. So it's not a multi-track preset that won't contain routing, but a selected tracks can retain the routing. All right, wonderful to see Nick Saya on. Glad you can make it. All right, so we have Aguel sending greetings from Switzerland. All right, we have Jim Fox. Wonderful to see Jim Fox from Alexandria, Virginia. He says, all right, which is fine. Nuendo 12 tempo detection. It adds an unnecessary beat or misses a beat. How can you manually delete or add a beat to the detected tempo without shifting the following beats? Okay, so let's do a quick tempo detection. So I'll just do new project. Jim probably lives like a mile or two away from me. Great to see you on, Jim. We'll have to get together now that COVID is kind of over. So let me just import. Okay, so let's say we want to do just a quick tempo detection of this file here. So I turn on my Alright, so I'm going to select it and let's do our tempo detection. Alright, so we'll come to project to tempo detection. Alright, now when you do this, it's actually going to start off, and you could make adjustments right afterwards. So let's say we have our tempo map here. So if you notice that like maybe a drum fill or something got off, so while this is open, we'll see that we have this direction of reanalysis. So leave this window open and it switches you to the time warp tool, and then you could just move this, once we're here, you could say, okay, move measure 31 over, and you could make your adjustments here. And then it will, let me just see if this is, just set my signature here. Okay, so I'm going to set this to 4/4. Okay, so now I'll just do this again. Okay, so now as you would make an adjustment here with this turned on, it will automatically, with that enabled, as you make your adjustment, it will calculate again based on that particular point. So, but even now, if you say, okay, afterwards, if you didn't do it then, just use the time warp tool. And at this point, you can say, okay, I just want to grab the time warp tool, and we'll make sure that we are in warp grid. And I'll just make sure I'll start off and make sure that we're in warp grid here to start with. Okay, so we'll just say warp grid. All right, so now that we're in warp grid, we could just move. And what it's going to do is, let's say, okay, this is actually supposed to be here. And it's going to recalculate from that point on the tempo changes. So if you have this little button turned on to the right, so make sure you're in warp grid, and then where you see it off, just simply make the adjustment. And it will say, okay, at that point, I want the tempo to fall like right here at the transient. And then it will do an analysis from that point forward on. So if it got like on the offbeat, you can say, okay, let's just make this little change, and then it will reanalyze everything going past that point. So make sure you're in warp grid mode. Leave this dialog box open, and it places you into kind of the into the time warp mode. And at that point, you could just simply make your adjustments. So, but great to see you on the live stream, Jim. Hope you're doing well. And maybe I have some time off on Monday. Maybe we'll get together Monday if you're free. All right, so Aldo asks, is it possible to save MIDI quantization swing percentage within the project? So I don't think it's stored within the project, but it's actually just going to be stored within the particular, if you are doing quantization. So let's say if we come, and let me just add a quick instrument track. So if you're applying the percentage for, let's say we go to like the MIDI insert and we have the quantizer plugin. So as we're here, if we have the swing set directly here, that will be saved within the project. If you are doing quantization, so let's say, okay, you do 16th notes, and we open up the quantize panel here, and we have our swing percentage. So let's say, okay, we're doing 65% swing. We can see that change. We still have our 16th note, but we could have our swing percentage automatically stored as well. So you could just simply store that as presets directly, right there. So you could just simply store the swing percentage right there and save it as a preset. So you say, okay, I want it to be, 16th notes, and let's say you really like a 78% swing, just come over here and save a preset, or you could remove presets directly from the quantize panel. And that way that particular setting will always be accessible in any project. But this would be, if you're doing on a quantizer plugin, that will be stored within the project itself. And if you do it from a quantize panel, that will be always global. And if you wanted to, for a particular track, I've seen people go as far as to just say the notepad, and you say, 78 percent, swing feel. So, and just leave a note if they, needed to, requantize based on the value that was applied to the particular track. All right, so we see a question. It says, I bought the full Absolute 6 package. Congratulations. It's a wonderful collection of instruments. Do I need to install Hallian Sonic and the cut down instruments? Hallian, you don't need to install Hallian Sonic. It could all be played directly inside of Hallian. Some stuff like if you have a MIDI file and you wanted that to play a general MIDI sound bank, I think that would do it inside of Hallian Sonic, and maybe not the full version of Hallian. So that could be one consideration, but you don't need to, if you have Hallian, you want to do everything in Hallian as opposed to Hallian or Hallian Sonic, you don't have to install the Hallian Sonic. So. And I just see also when installing Cubase, so it would be kind of there's no no difference in like, Retrolog, Groove Agent, SE. You probably wouldn't need to install because you have Groove Agent, or Pad Shop 2 would be the same. So if you already have those installed with Cubase, you don't need to have it installed again. So. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters from Bay Area. John Barry says, cheers, Greg. Who needs AI when you have real intelligence? So I'm sure there's probably so much information on live streams that someone could feed in for doing, of me doing, where they could mimic my voice. So. But I think intelligence is good too. All right, so we see Arnold ask, hi Greg, let's say I have an audio file with an embedded tempo track. If I want to use this file later in another project, how should that file be saved or exported to maintain the tempo definition? So really all you have to do, if I wanted to embed the tempo information, like all the tempo changes of this into this particular file, you would just go to Audio, to Advanced, and you'd say Set Definition from Tempo. You'll get two choices. You could save this definition, and this is basically the tempo changes we could think of as a definition. So we could save it in a project only, but we would want to choose to write the definition to the audio files. And then at that point, the tempo, the tempo information would be written into the audio file. So again, go to Audio, to Advanced, and then to Set Definition from Tempo, and choose Write Definition to Audio Files. So Arnold also asked, after all, which audio formats can host the tempo information? So I think you could do it within like WAV files. I haven't personally tried within AIFF files, but I think most people are using WAV and broadcast WAV. So either of those would work well. All right. So we see Sable likes the new thumbnail. Yeah. So I thank you for the kind words. I saw also kind words from Jan about that. So yeah, I'm still on the offensive. I always don't want my picture in it, but Steinberg people, convinced me to do it. So, but we're glad you like it, and keep it a little fresh, make it more interesting. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we have a question from Alfred Pogo. Can you say anything about the integration of Cubase 12 with the Yamaha Motif XF? I love using the control surface on the XF for Cubase integration is pretty deep. I'm using Cubase Artist 10.5 now. So it's really, the level of integration that you have in 10.5 and 12 would be the same. You could also use the montage controllers in like a MIDI remote. So if you wanted to set that up, you could utilize it as a MIDI remote, but how you work with it in 10.5 would also be applicable in Cubase 12. All right, so we have a question. Hi, how can I create a song in style for Yamaha digital keyboard on Cubase? So if you're looking for styles, I don't think I'm not as super versed in styles, but I'm not sure if anything could really create styles or if that's kind of internally done at Yamaha to create that so that it's to protect their intellectual property. So there isn't a take my sequence and turn it into a style type of function in Cubase. So I think that's still kind of proprietary and not accessible to the users, but I'm not an expert, but I could check with some of my colleagues at Yamaha as well just to check. And we see Roland Gerard also says Motif XF integration with Cubase 12 works fine. So all right, so Quellen asks, hello Greg, is it possible to save a preset with the Hallion 7 sample instrument and open it into another project from another PC, or will I lose the sample on another PC? All right, so you would probably have to so it could depend on your settings. So let's say if I come over to Hallion here, and I haven't done this in 7 yet, but let's come over, we'll add an instrument track. Okay, so let's put it into Hallion 7. All right. Let me just. So let's say we want to do. All right, we'll start with advanced. Okay, so I just dragged that sample. So within, if you get to the program here, so if you have your sample that you've done, what I've seen a lot of people do is just to take this sample and right click into like this particular program, and then you could say export, you know, so at this point you could export this. So we say we want to export program as a VST3 preset, but you could also just say you want to export samples. And then when you go to open up a project, and often what I've seen people do is export the samples into the project folder. So they'll have something that just says Hallion samples. And that way, when Hallion opens up from the project, all the samples will be able to be found. So that's how it's kind of saved within the particular project. So just saving it, if it has like audio files, the audio file would need to transfer over with it. But if you save this into your project file, you could just choose to export the samples. And here you could say, okay, this is the name of the preset and what file format, and just tell where you want it to export. So again, often you could, I'll just show you kind of in my friend Clay Ostwald, is amazingly talented, one of my favorite people. But let's come over here, and I think we could show some of the architecture in one of his projects. So we'll come over to documents, and we'll do projects. Trying to remember the name of this project. You hear the song. I'm just trying to remember the name in Spanish of it. All right, see if I can find it again real quick. But I think he put the sample content into the folder. Let's see if there's any. Igualis, this is it. All right. So here we could see kind of the setups and sounds, and these are, I think, see if it's maybe in the audio folder, but I thought it was in here. So let's see. So we can see the Igualis Hallian archive. So here's all the samples are used in this project. So we can see like all the drum samples that they use. So they just stored it directly inside of the project folder so that everything lives with the project. So that's a common way of making sure when you go from Mac to PC that all the samples will be loaded up. Okay, so we see from Plastic People Records. Hi, Greg. I play in a guitar part in one. I edit so it loops perfect to the bar over 4 bars. Is there a quick way of making the grids and bars fit to the new event size? Auto pull bar 4 end of the loop event. So really, all you have to do is in this case, use go to your warp tool. And you want to say warp grid. So let's say I'll just do quick new project, or let me see, we could probably just do it inside of this. Okay, so if we want the grid to follow, so I'm going to take this out of musical mode, and let's say I want like this to fit into 2 bars. I want the grid, so I'm going to switch this to warp grid, and all I have to do is just move the grid. So we say, okay, measure 3, which is right here, where that dark line is. We'll just move that, and we'll say, okay, measure, it would be kind of right there. So we could just grab the warp grid mode, and once we do that, just go directly, and if we move this to the top, it's even easier. So you can say, okay, this is where measure 2 is, this is where measure 3 is, and then you could set the tempo based upon the musical event. So you could kind of do that manually. So let me know if that works for you. See, the Heartbreak Time Machine says import track archive. Oh my God, Cubase is the best. This solves a huge workflow for me. Yay! So you can get all sorts of great free knowledge on live stream. So glad that will work out for you. Okay, so John Barry just says, hi Greg, I remember back in the days of Atari, there was an input transformer preset that did the reverse of left-handed piano trick. I can't find it in the current. So let me know if, so when you say that did the reverse or left-handed piano trick, let me know what the piano trick is, John. I seem to remember that from Atari days. So if you wanted to take like the left hand and move it up, or what you want to accomplish, and we could see if I could get that sorted out for you. So sorry for my brain cramp. All right, so we see from Sable Winters, his new dongle solved her intermittent LCC2 error problem with the Eli sensor. The original one of over 20 years became corrupted somehow. So well, it's good that you had it for 20 years. That's great. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain, or España. All right, we see that Michael has passed on 1 gallon of silver water strawberry ice cream. All right, Spike Williams checking in from Wales. Thanks for being on today. All right, so we have Dennis from Stayner, Ontario, Canada. Greg, his question is there a way to set the track size description height so when you zoom in and out of track, it does not keep changing size? So I think if we kind of zoom in and out here, it doesn't change. I'm not sure if it's like changing. Let me just get one with some more audio tracks in it. Okay, so let's say, so generally, like if we zoom in here, we could, if we use the zoom tool, we could zoom like the selection. And I think that there might be a preference. So, but if we zoom in this way, it's not going to affect the track height, but there may be a preference that helps with this. Let me just look under maybe. All right, let me just look for this. Just try with some of the modifiers. So let's try control. Yeah, so try, if you zoom, we set our selection here and it'll zoom to show that. We could double click. But if we hold down control or command, it won't change the height. So let me know if that's what you want to do. I'm going to reread the question. So again, we could just kind of, if we zoom this way, it doesn't affect the vertical height. Just using the zoom tool, it could do that. But holding down, using the zoom tool with the control key will allow you to maintain the track height. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding that question, Dennis. All right, we have Boris Schultz just saying hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Joseph just asking, is there a major UI update in Cubase 13? So generally we can't talk about, if I was involved in testing, I would probably be under a non-disclosure agreement, so we don't really talk about new features and new functionality until it's released. So it gets to be kind of a bad tease. All right, so we see Sable says she can't believe she has now accessed all her Steinberg presets, instruments, and sounds. That's great. All right, AJ Soundbites just wants to know how everyone is doing, so I think we're all doing well. All right, so we see, do you know if Cubase will come with more granular VSTI and effects than PadShop? Other DAWs and hardware do, and it's amazing for production. So, I mean, PadShop is a pretty amazing granular synthesizer. So, that, very few people have really tapped its potential of what you could do inside of PadShop. So once you start working directly with this, you can just, do some pretty stunning granular synthesis with this. If you wanted more capabilities, like the full version of Hallion, which also comes as, so sold separately as well as sold, will also have full granular capabilities. So that could give you some more granular. So if you wanted to go to the grain synth, you could come over here in addition to organ, samples, FM, spectral, wavetable. So, and another one that you could check out, I think that even comes with Cubase, that I think, let me just check. So we'll get to Hallion Sonic here. And let me see if I remember which one it is. May not have it installed. Flux. So also kind of play around with Flux as well. So there's a number of different options. So Flux, PadShop, plus probably the most comprehensive instrument ever conceived is Hallion 7. So there's other options that are available. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Okay. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, we see Matt Elston checking in from London. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. Gareth says new thumbnail is marvelous. So let's see. Ike Sander says Greg is a wizard in Cubase, so much knowledge. So we're glad people like the thumbnail. All right. Thank you for the kind words about knowledge. Gareth says I have to watch out for paparazzi. So I try to be the mysterious, voice that, it's at damn shows people come up and tell me I rip off that guy's videos on YouTube a lot, and then they hear my voice and recognize me. All right, wonderful to see Agent K on. All right. All right, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, says styles are done with XF data, and you need Yamaha internal tools to develop styles. And he's a former PSR series programmer. So thanks for the clarification on that. All right, wonderful to see Val Yu checking in from Vienna, Austria. He also likes the thumbnail. It's great. The team at Steinberg will be happy to hear. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great comments. All right, just a question of what genres do you guys make and use Cubase for? And that they use ambient, future, garage, lo-fi, hip hop. So maybe our people could. And I guess it's Alexander Music, just checking in from Netherlands. He was one that was wondering. All right, so we see Kev Human has Cubase AI 4, says this is like bumping into an old mate that my present DAW won't let me hang out with anymore. So you could buy it and you could hang out in the Cubase world anytime you want. It's great. You could start off with the trial version. All right, so we have clarification from John Barry. He says, hi, Greg. So the lowest note is on the right and the highest note is on the left for a left-handed player. So you play bass with the right hand. Hope that helps. Okay, so I think I might understand what you're trying to do, John. So let me just give it a shot here. It might be just mirroring. So let's come over here. Okay, so let's say we have. All right, so as I play up. All right, and so let's come over and take a look at the transformer. Okay, let's look in the factory presets, see if there's. Okay, so let's see if there's a. Let me just. Okay, so let's take our notes here. And maybe it's under mirror, so let's say C3. So this way we could, at C3, as I play, I'll just open up just the MIDI editor here so you can see what notes. So at C3, if I wanted to reverse, I hit C, now I'm hitting D. It inverts that. So it's kind of like setting a split point. All right, so let's say notes. say maybe, let's see what options we have in the last event. All right, so let's say we'll say notes higher than C3, and then maybe we want to add 24. So now when I play C3, all right, so let's say notes that are bigger than C3, let's subtract 24. Okay, so let's say bigger or equal to C3. So now at C3, it's playing C1. So I'll play just, let's say this is C1 here. So at C3 or whatever split point or greater, it's going to subtract, let's say 24. So now this will play 2 octaves lower. So let me know if that's kind of what you want it to do. Is at a certain point, like this range will play the left hand. And I could do one to take from C1 to C3 and play it up an octave or up 2 octaves as well. So, but this way I could play my traditional left hand in my right hand. So let me know if that's helpful, John. And I'll see if I could do some research on that preset. If you want to send an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. See, Gareth says Pad Shop is a secret marvel. See, Value says 7-Up is the Sprite of connoisseurs. All right. So we see Sousa asks for chord progressions. There is a chord pad, I know, but for drum fill and drum break, how can I set on pads to tell me if there are any other option? All right. So let's say if we have a acoustic agent kit. So if I now want to come over here and let's say we have our instrument patterns here. So, and I'll just make this a little, so I can play my individual sounds, but if you wanted to have different patterns, we could just trigger patterns from different MIDI notes here. So I could have intros, endings, fills, and just trigger these from MIDI. So, and you can see the MIDI notes here. So if you just wanted to, so instead of like chord pads for chords, we could just have these play back the different sounds and do fills accordingly. So you could just say, okay, I want to start off. And then when I want to do like a drum fill, so we could have different pads. So, and that's again using some of the acoustic agent kits, so that you know. And those will have all the fills kind of programmed by default. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, Gareth asks, Greg, could you show some of the more hidden and lesser known features of the channel settings window? Good question. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. So when we go to channel settings, there's a lot of things that people don't necessarily get. So let's come over here and I'll just revert this. All right, and let's say I want to add like a group track. And let's add an effects track. All right, so when we go to our channel view window, so when we start off, we could kind of look at it. We can see our inserts. We'll have, sometimes you may have a channel EQ as a default view, or the channel strip as your default view. So you could click directly there. Now we can see that the channel strip could have, a noise gate. We could have different compressors. We can see our channel EQ, the de-esser. Let's go to tape. And I wanted to have like a brick wall limiter. Now, if we wanted to change the order of these processes, all we had to do is drag and drop to change the order of them. Now, in this signal flow here, we could see a pre-section. So if we wanted to reverse the phase or add more gain, we could also have kind of a high cut, low cut filter. So if we wanted to just come over and say, okay, let's turn on, let's say you got presets for that, but you can say, okay, let's adjust our, high cut, low cut filters, so that you could just make adjustments there if needed. So you can say, okay, let's come over here, let's roll that off. So that doesn't take up one of the bands of EQ. So we can have 16 inserts. If we have multiple inserts going on, and we wanted to change the order of the inserts, we could just kind of drag and drop and change the order. So if I want that to come afterwards, each of these can be pre or post fader. So just by right clicking on it, so when it goes to, we see this line, and this line, we can move our inserts. So if we needed, one pre-fader insert and 15 post-fader inserts, we could just kind of move this particular green line. So it could be dynamically allocated between the different, on different tracks. Now we have this going into our inserts. We have our pre-section. This will go into inserts. This will also go into our channel strip. But if we want the channel strip to come first in the signal, we could click right here, and then the channel strip can come before the inserts. So just clicking here, we could just choose where what the signal flow is between the channel strip and the insert. So we could toggle that. Now, when we have different tracks, so let's say if we're on our kick track and we go to this particular channel settings, we could just say, okay, our kick track is being fed in from the mono track. We have our kick, and this is going to two different targets. So we could now just say this is going to our group and to our effects output. So I can say, okay, now I just want to look at my group channel. So while I'm there, I could just say, okay, this is now, let's just come right over here, and we could just kind of pick our different. So if we wanted to see the output chain, so if we click right on here, we can say, now I want to edit the group. I want to edit the main output. and we could see, okay, I'm on a particular track. So let's say I'm on my effects channel track. So let's say we'll select this track. And now if we're in our effects channel track, we could see what sources are feeding that particular channel. So I could say, oh, I want to adjust the snare. I could jump to the snare. Let's adjust our master output. When we go to our master output, this is being fed by these particular sources. So we could just kind of navigate pretty easily. So as different tracks are, as we look at the settings, so once you have this turned on, we could just come over and have, the full signal path and navigate quickly. When using the channel EQ, something that's really handy that a lot of people don't know about is, let's say I want to look at my kick track here. So we'll solo kick. Okay. So let's say I want to look at my kick and snare. Okay, and I'm on one of my kick tracks here. So we open this up. We could do a comparison EQ. So I could say, let's compare the EQ of the snare top and the track. So I could just come over here, make an EQ adjustment in the snare. So as we're here, so again, then if I wanted to just say, okay, we're doing our comparison EQ, I wanted to go to my kick track. So this way I could actually see kind of both sources and EQ against each other. So we could see two different sources. Now, when we go to our EQ settings, we could save a default preset. We could also say, okay, I want to see my EQs as knobs, or I want to see them as sliders. We could show the FFT pre-EQ or hold the FFT peak curve. You could set the transparency between the different tracks. So all that is, really helpful. And one of the great EQ tricks that a lot of people miss is, let's say I'm in the key of A. So I want to take this EQ band here, and instead of going to the frequency, I could say, let's go to A4. And now I hit A4, it'll just take me to that particular frequency. Let's say, okay, let's go to A3, knock it down an octave, so I could actually type in the pitch based on the key that I want to emphasize, as opposed to having to memorize every frequency. So those are a couple of things. So in sends, when we wanted to come over here, you could right click and change each send to pre or post fader. So if you want it to be more kind of aqua or blue, then we could just have that be pre, and we could right click and make that post fader as well, just by simply right clicking on the fader. You also have panning. So if you have multiple effect sends, you could pan the effects accordingly. So if you wanted to have like two guitar parts, and you want it like one guitar part pan to the left, but the actual reverb pan to the right, to the opposite speakers, so you could do all of your panning as well. So that's a couple of little tips and tricks on the channel settings. Thanks for asking about that, Gareth. Hopefully someone's learned a new tip. Okay. So we see question from Spencer B. Hi, Greg. Do you know of a way to import plugin patches into the Cubase patch presets? I currently use them something. Add them as I find something I like, but wanted to know if there was a faster way. So So when you say import plugin patches, I'm not sure if it's into the Cubase patch presets. I currently add them as I find something I like, but I want to know if there was a better, faster way. So I'm not sure if you're like trying to import patches or presets for like an instrument, or if you wanted to navigate and find like VST instrument presets that you like and kind of set them aside. So, one of the things that you can do is just come over here and let's say we go to our VST instruments and we're in Retrolog and we're like, okay, let's go into this particular library, is that you do have kind of a rating system. So you could just say, okay, I wanted to, let's make this over a little closer. So at this point, you could choose kind of different rating schemes. So you can say, I only want to find 4 stars. So when you go to, so you say, I really like these sounds and I want to come back to those. So you can say, okay, I want to go to all of my 4-star sounds, my 3-star, my 1-star sound. I really don't like those. So this way you can say, I want to find 3 stars. And so, but let me know. So importing, because usually you don't import plugin patches as patch presets. Usually we have patch scripts that are for other like hardware instruments. So when you say I currently add them as I find something I like, but wanted to know if there was a faster way. So if you're just kind of looking, like as you go through different presets, if you wanted to navigate to find them, you could just come, give it stars as like when I get a new plugin, I'll just go through and, just go through and rate the presets that I know that would be useful for different things. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Spencer. All right. Nick is saying he's definitely didn't fall asleep in his chair. We realize it's late in the UK. All right. All right. So we see, hi, how can I get the cursor to continue recording from where I left off? Note says now it jumps back a bit when I want to continue to record. All right. So let's say I want to record on this track. And I'm just going to hit record. So, all right, so I have kind of my pre-count turned on. All right, so let's say I'll just do a new project to make it a little easier. All right, so say I add an audio track, okay. All right, so let's say I'm recording. All right, so now when I stop, I hit record again. It's gonna just record directly right from where I stopped. Now you could have a count in. So if you go into the transport and you activate count in, which is just to the right of the metronome, and if you don't see that, make sure that you extend that over. So now when I have a count in, it will wait like 2 bars, or maybe go back. So you could go into, let's see, transport options. So let's say, there's so make sure that you don't have like the pre-count in. So I'll just make this really large. So let's say as we're playing along, I record. All right, so stop, and I record again. Now you could activate a pre-roll. So that's another thing that you might have turned on. So let's say if we So there's a pre-roll and post-roll. So now we turn this on, we can say, okay, I want it to activate my pre-roll. So say, okay, I want to do this. So let's say I start at measure 17 here. So now when I hit record, it's going to go back like a beat. Or if we wanted to go back a measure. So right now when I hit record, because pre-roll is on, it's going to roll back. It'll just kind of roll back a measure. But if pre-roll isn't activated and pre-count isn't activated, it seems like it will just kind of go directly right when I hit stop. And if you have another preference that could also play into this is if you go to preferences and let's go to transport, there is a return to start position on stop. So what this will do is if I start at this position and now I stop, it'll just take me right back to that same position where I started. So if that is turned off, you could, again, just come to preferences, to transport, return to start position on stop. And now, let's say I stop here and I hit record again, it's just going to continue straight on from that point. So check to if you have that preference enabled under transport, return to start position on stop, or if you have pre-roll or the count-in active. Check those things, but it should, if those aren't turned on, I think you'll be kind of all set with how it works by default. So let me adjust my computer here quickly. All right, so you just see a question, what about Cubase Artist? So it obviously shares a lot of, of the same functions in Cubase Pro, but let me know if there's something in particular with Cubase Artist that, but, we generally show Pro because we generally use Pro in the live stream. So I'm not sure if that's, because it has all the feature sets. So I'm not sure if it's with Cubase Artist with, granular synths or not, or. Okay, so we have a question from Roby. He says, I hope this is not a problem to explain, but could you go into the sampling features of Pad Shop, Greg? So there's not a lot of sampling features, but what you can do, so it doesn't directly sample. So we could, feed. So we'll add a Pad Shop instrument. And we'll just kind of load up a quick preset here. So say, all right, so if I wanted to take any audio file and use that as kind of the basis, I could just drag the audio file directly in. So now I could just say, okay, let's just take this file and use that as the basis. So it's not really like sampling per se, so it's not like you hit a button and record and it samples. But I could take this particular preset and just kind of feed it other samples that I want and say, okay, I just want to take this and I want to throw a bass sound in that. And start making. So you could do stuff like that. So getting the audio in is really just kind of drag and drop right into Pad Shop. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. How can I organize my create instrument dialog box so I can put my instruments in folders I like? So come over to, I think this is like a plugin collection. So if we go to the VST plugin manager, we'll see kind of our default. So say with our VST instruments, we want to click on plus, and we'll say, let's make an empty one. So we'll say, okay, let's come over here. We'll give it a name. So we'll say May 19th, 2023. All right, and then if we wanted to come over here, we could just say we're going to make a folder. So we'll say new folder, and we could call it my fave granular. I could say, okay, I want pad shop, and I wanted to do analog synth, so we could just come over here, make a new folder, and I want this to be, backbone, or sorry, let me just, so I want it, backbone in there and retrolog, and I wanted to make a new folder. We'll call it drums, and I want backbone and Groove Agent and Groove Agent SE to go into drums. So we could have folders and create this, and then you could just, as soon as you go to your instruments or plugins, you could just have that as your folder structure for VST instrument organization. So let me know if that's what you want it to do. Okay, so we see from Andrew asks, hi, are music visualization like Whitecap, Standalone, and Milk Drop useful in music production contexts, especially with mastering, because the CQT analyzer component doesn't exist in FooBar 2000? So I'm not that familiar with those, but if you go into spectral layers, there's lots of different metering options. I'm not sure if you wanted to just kind of add like a graphical visualization, so you could have something like a visual to go along with the song on YouTube, something like that. But I'm not that familiar with the tools that you mentioned. But you could probably do something with with supervision. There's a number of different tools for analysis in there. So even if you wanted to just come over here, let's get to, so I'm not sure if this is the kind of visualization that you're kind of looking for. Start fresh with one. So even if you wanted to come over here and just say, okay, I want to do, so if it's something kind of like that, or but there's a number of different metering choices here, so you could just say, while you're playing, so you can see which particular frequencies are kind of out of phase and stuff. So, and you could combine, have up to 9 different meters going on at the same time. So, but let me know if that's helpful at all. All right, so we see Rodham Picks just saying happy Friday to everyone. He hopes to learn new things again, so that's great. Thanks for joining us today in the live stream. All right, so we see a question, how Cubase can convert polyphonic audio to MIDI. Thanks. So it's not really intended to do that. So we have Very Audio, which can do that. What some people will do is take it and split it apart using SpectraLayers Pro, and then you could take monophonic sources and split it, but it's not. There's no functions in Cubase for kind of polyphonic extraction of MIDI, and most tools are still, a little early. We'll put it that way. All right, reading through comments. My chat field just jumped. All right, so we see just comment, Cubase so easy with so much things. I missed the group presets though. It was so much fun playing with it. The FX modulator is so great for ambient textures. So you could take any MIDI information. So let's say if we wanted to take any MIDI or audio source. So let's say I want to take drum loops. So let's say I want to take this drum loop, and I could just, directly come over to, so when we go to our hit points, we'll just say, okay, I'm going to edit the hit points, and then we could just say, and then all you have to do is say make groove, and then all your groove presets can just show up directly here, so they could be stored very easily to have access to them. So okay, so we see question in the edit channel setting window equals EQ analyzer in detail, please. What are those dark EQ curves? All right, so let's take a look. Just pop over to. All right, so I'm not sure if it's these, like where you can say, okay, if we want to do kind of low pass, high pass filters. So what we could do is just kind of. A lot of times people may want to cut out rumble in particular tracks like vocals in case you have like breaths or footsteps, stuff like that, so people will kind of filter those out. But if we're going into our different EQ bands here, we could have kind of full support for all of our EQs as well. So but let me know if these are the dark ones, but that's just, we can think of it as like high cut, low cut. So as we turn it on, we could just say, okay, we want to just cut out, those particular frequencies or these particular frequencies. And that's kind of in addition to the 4 bands of parametric EQ. All right, so we see from Boyke, says, hello, I use a MacBook Pro with a Scarlett interface operating Cubase 12 Pro. Question, if I want to buy, for instance, a Yamaha DM3 mixer, do I still need a sound card to use my DAW? So you could use the built-in audio of your MacBook Pro, but you could run the DM3 as your mix console, and it has USB multi-track recording in and out, or you could use Dante. So there's really no need to use a Scarlett if you have the DM3 mixer, so it's a really slick mixer. So you could take it out for gigs, you could use it in the studio, you could use it as a control surface as well. So you don't need to have a Scarlett, it would just kind of be unnecessary. All right. Alexander Music just says, I'm so excited for Cubase 13. Wonder what they'll come out with. So wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. Thanks for being on the live stream today. Okay, so I have a question. Dennis from Stayner, Ontario. I have the track so I see the name and the edit button, lanes, etc. When I hit Z again, it goes back to the edit button, lanes, etc. Do not show. Is there a preference? Okay, so let's take a look. Thank you for all the wonderful questions so far. All right, so let's say we have all right, so let's say I will let me just set my track control settings here. All right, so I'm going to put this say, okay, so I have okay, so let's say we have our track control settings like this, where I can see the edit channel settings right there. It says when you hit Z again, it goes back to the edit button, lanes, etc. do not show. Okay, so let me just so I hit Z to kind of blow up that one particular track. All right, let me see if all right, so let's say if we're here and we're all at this height. So I'll just come over here. Let's hit Z again. All right, let me just see if I think this is the original. All right, so let's say we hit Z. Okay, so I think we do this. So maybe instead of hitting Z, that you would just undo the zoom. So let's say I have this here and I hit Z. So I see where it's kind of jumping back to a different state than it was. I'll make sure to mention that. But let's say if we have this all set for this state, and I hit Z, but there is kind of, if you go to zoom, just to undo zoom, So you could try that function. I know it's probably not as convenient as hitting Z a second time, but I see where it kind of navigates it down to a particular height. And let's see if this is set to mixing as our template. Yeah, I see where it's kind of just minimized after hitting Z again. So I'll make sure to include that in some comments and feedback. Sorry about that. I see John Koskian says he could use another year to master Cubase 12. So, but by then Cubase 13 could be out. Who knows? All right. All right, so we see Heartbreak Time Machine asks, will Cubase 13 have a VST called Trust Fund that adds money to your checking account every month? So we're working on it. It will be all AI based. So. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. I can save Cubase key commands. How can I import them? All right, so all you had to do is say, okay, we go to our key commands. So we'll go to Edit, to key commands. All right, so once we've saved our key command, so let's say we will just come over here. All right, so say we'll come over here and I'll save. So we'll call them May 19th, 2023. Okay, so I want to go back to let's say default key commands. So once you've saved it, just kind of click in the list, and then you could just go directly back to the key commands right there. So once you save the preset, it's just going to show up in the presets list, and you could go right there. I'll save my key commands. So, and that's all you'd have to do. All right, wonderful to see Soren. You don't have to worry about being late. We're just glad that you made it. All right, so we have a question from, I guess it's Giampi or Giampi Music. Is this new Cubase 12? So Cubase 12 has been out a little over a year. So it is Cubase 12 Pro that we're looking at. See, Gareth just mentions that clicking on a green line to move it. Didn't know that, and it's probably in the inserts in the channel strip view. All right, so we have a question from Soren. It says, if I use direct offline processing on several places on an event, is there a way to see the places exactly, or is it just a wave icon at the far right of the event? All right, so let's go ahead and just do some processing here. Okay, so let's say we'll take this project here and do some offline processing. All right, so I want to come here. Let's reverse. And I want to take this and fade. All right, let's take this and run it through plugin. All right, so let's go ahead and just kind of listen to. All right, so we'll see our reverse here. So all right, so we can see so we get an indication of the range here. So let's say if I do a process here at the very end. All right, so I think that as we would select, so it doesn't seem like it shows exactly where it is. So if we did it kind of multiple locations, but you could always just come over, delete that and see, where the particular effect had taken care of. But I don't think it indicates visually what region of the file. I could play around with some more if you want to email me, Soren. I'd be happy to kind of play around and see if I could figure something out with that. But we do see kind of the range, that it's not the whole file. So let's say if we do the whole file, so we can see that if we do just the whole file versus a range, that's indicated, but not specifically where in the range it is. Sorry about that. But I'll play around with it some more if you want to email me. Okay, we have a question. How do you make an audio file, for example, a kick or snare, into a MIDI track? Okay, so if you want to do like kind of drum replacement, we'll show you how to do that. Okay, so let's come over here. Let's say I'll just revert this since I've destroyed it pretty well here. Okay, so I want to take like the kick and snare of this and turn it into MIDI. So with this, I have a virtual instrument that's already loaded, a Groove Agent kit that we can. So if we open this up, we have. All right, so just kind of generic sounding drum. So I'm going to leave that track selected. So I want to go to my drum track here, and I'm going to double click, and we'll go to hit points, and we'll say let's edit the hit points, and we want to kind of find the threshold so that we're only really kind of finding like where our kicks are. And then we can say, now I have my MIDI track selected, so I'm going to say we want to go to the create tab, and let's just come and we'll say let's create a MIDI note. I'm going to say let's make this into a C1. I want to retain the dynamic velocity. Hit OK. So now if I mute the kicks, it's just now playing directly into the VST instrument. So if I want to make that louder or tune it, and if I want to do the same for the snare, so I could leave that track selected, and we'll come over. So let's create MIDI notes. And I want to put this onto D1 of the first selected track, and that's where our drums are. So that's the MIDI that's automatically being generated, so I'll mute. So now if I want to take this snare and make it louder, or now if I wanted to add just a reverb on this snare sample, I could come over here. Let's get to our aux sends. Let's say, okay, let's just add verb on send 1. So I have that selected. Let's get to the amp section. So you could just, so again, just, you know, go to the hit points. And once you kind of set the threshold so that we're not including tracks that are bleeding through, click on the create icon here and then create MIDI notes. And then you could send it to a new track or to a new destination, and you could just have both of those tracks kind of playing directly on top of each other and do your drum replacement that easily. See, Garrett says the compare EQ is the revelation of the day. So yeah, it's always a fun one. It helps solves a lot of problems. See, my dead friends just says, "Woo! I did not know that. That was great." So. So you see DS asks, hi Greg, Dave from London. Out of interest, how long do you get to learn new features of a Cubase release? You know, I may be playing with it like a month or so before, you know, 4 to 6 weeks before release. And those are kind of real time crunch months of, you know, not only figuring out new features and doing testing, but figuring out how to present it as well. So yeah, I get a little bit of time, but, you know, it's a lot of late nights and early mornings, just getting around it so that, you know, on release, because I get my phone will blow up, my email will blow up, just how to do this, you know, so. And usually I'm also doing kind of walkthrough videos for new features as well. So. Okay. So I see a comment from Jazz Juice says the 2 frequency curves to compare in one window isn't new. It exists from at least Cubase 11. So I think it was 8 or 8.5 when it was introduced, something like that, maybe 9 as well. So yeah, I did a tutorial video recently for the Cubase YouTube channel showing that. All right, so we see from John Costigan says, "Hello, Greg. I'm still having problems with Cubase 1206 Windows 10 closing on startup. How to troubleshoot it if it starts a second instance in the background visible when I close the error window. So let me know if it's like a message that's something along these lines." So if it's like this error message that you're getting, like the safe mode, so let me know if it's that or if it's a different error message. So generally if you get a message like this, it may show you like if there's a plugin that's causing problems when Cubase exits, and it's kind of being nice and showing you, saying, hey, there's something that's up and maybe you should start without the third-party plugins instantiated. So it used to be in the early days that would start up, and if you had a plugin that was causing the system and it wouldn't boot, there wasn't a way to bypass third-party plugins to make it boot for you. So you could get in kind of this cycle, and you'd have to manually remove, certain plugins one at a time or in small groups, and try to find a culprit so that you could get Cubase open to then tell it not to look at particular plugins. So that's why it kind of gives you the safe startup option. So let me know if you're just getting the safe startup option like we showed just a minute ago, or if it's another error message. And if you want to email it to me, a screenshot, send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'd be happy to take a look at it for you, John. Gareth is impressed with Michael Team's ice cream distribution tonight, so that's great. Okay, so Spencer kind of sent a clarification question. Says, when using third-party VST instruments, I find sounds like currently I save these as Cubase presets. I was wondering if there's a way to save all the sounds of IE Easy keys into Cubase presets, like a SysX dump. So there isn't a way to automatically do it if the companies are using, when we go to like your VST plugins here. So let's say if we come over here and you're probably just saving a preset here that can be accessed inside of Cubase. So with this, there isn't like a SysX dump. So there is part of the VST3 specification that will have all of those VST presets automatically available. A lot of companies, and it could be that, TuneTrack, which does easy keys, I believe, they may have their own preset system, and I understand that companies are running in different plugin formats, or that they could have their own preset file management structure, but there isn't a way to do that. It's part of the VST3 specifications, but a lot of third-party VSTs don't support that. I understand why, so that they can have consistency regardless of what platform or plugin host that they're dealing with, but there isn't a way to automatically transfer that over. So, but you could, maybe someone at the company has, those particular, maybe someone has already created those as presets that you could just simply access, but they're not like SysX files like, we see in traditional hardware instruments and synthesizers. All right. And Gareth is crediting Kaja Gugu with Michael Teams being able to dish out ice cream tonight. That brings back some memories. All right. All right, so PZ136 just saying thanks for the tips. You're welcome. Great to see you on. right, my chat field jumped. Let me just find where I was. Okay. All right, so Dalbsky asks a question. Hi, Greg. When I quantize, I want to see the MIDI notes moving. You know how. So anytime that you quantize MIDI notes, they're going to move. So let's say I will just come here to like a drum editor. And let's say I have 16th notes entered in here. So I will just come over here. So I want to take this range of 16th notes. So it could be that when, let's say we quantize to 8th notes and I hit Q. So we see that those 16th notes turned into 8th notes. Now, if I wanted to apply something, let's undo that quantization. And let's say I'm going to take all of these 16th notes here and I want to apply a groove. So we have 16th notes and I want to apply the groove here. So let's say our swing will go to 78%. So we can see visually what's going to happen here. So now when I quantize, all the notes will visually move that are quantized. So it could really depend on your quantized value. So if you say, okay, I want to do 64th notes, and we're at 16th notes, that you don't see a change. But if we say, okay, let's do 8th note triplets. So we'll come over and say 8th note triplets. Now when I do it, we could see the change and the notes will move. When you don't see like quantizing notes applied is when perhaps using the quantizer plugin, because this will process it in real time. So if we go to our quantizer and say, okay, let's just make our swing really high. So this will play back with the swing. And then if I go to MIDI and choose freeze MIDI modifiers, this is basically going to take the MIDI plugins and embed the results of the MIDI plugins into the tracks. We go to freeze MIDI modifiers. We can see that those MIDI notes will change accordingly. So check to make sure that, it's an appropriate quantized value. So if you're, quantizing 16th notes, something that's 8th notes, you may not see it visually move. But, for anything that, is kind of in line with what the rhythmic value of the music is, it should just move. You should see it reflected, unless it's the quantizer plugin. Then you'd have to just go to freeze MIDI modifiers. Then you'll see it reflected visually. All right. We see Peter, Montreal got 1 gallon of Millennium Crunch ice cream. That sounds good. Okay. See that Uno Momento just went to launch the boat in the lake, and that is the official start of summer. So in the U.S., we have Memorial Day next weekend, so it's a 3-day weekend, and that's usually our unofficial start of summer. But all right, and we have Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California. Thanks for being on. Great to see you, Gerald. Thanks for joining us today. We have Tiago joining us from Brazil. Glad you can make it. Michael Teams wants people to drop kick the like button. All right. All right, so we see Tiago just asks improvement request. Audio alignment does not work as expected in many cases for choir groups. Greg, your example of the project, Somos Iguales, works fine, but in many cases, for me, it does not. So if you have multiple people that are out of time on the same track, which is often what you get in a choir, recording. So if you have 3 people that are on a single track and the 3 people are singing out of time, that's not going to work. It's going to work kind of on a track by track basis. So, what a lot of people do, if you need to do, that type of work, you're going to have each musician on their own microphone without bleeding through. Because if you have one track of a recording and you hear 4 people singing and those 4 people within one single track are out of time, what it does is it takes the timing of one track and applies it to another track. But if within the track itself it's not in time, then there's not much that could be really done about that. So, other than capturing a better performance. So let me know. And usually that's choir performances. I realize that, you kind of capture an ensemble and you may not have, everyone isolated and on an individual mic. But, if you have 4 people that are all slightly out of time on one track and 4 people that are slightly out of time differently on a different track, those aren't going to line up. And I don't think it'll really work in anything because that one single track has the timing problems. So multiple tracks of isolated sources, all the alignment stuff is going to work well. But, if it's multiple out of time sources on a single track, then it's not going to work as in that manner. All right, so we see Attracted to the Metal like Magneto. Hey guys, Sam from Suffolk, England joined us. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see question from Soren. I just bought a UR22C and the loopback function, making it possible to get Windows system sounds, Spotify, YouTube directly into Cubase for analysis with supervision. So I think really the intention is to take your DAW source, your Cubase sound, and a microphone. So you could combine those two. Just shut off my phone. So you could combine those 2 sources and send it to something like I'm using in OBS. So I don't think it's intended to take the YouTube sound and feed that directly into Cubase. It's intended to take the Cubase sound plus a microphone that's connected into input 1 and use that for streaming, or it's often used for gaming. So you could, scream at people with high fidelity as you're shooting them in a game. So, but it's not, I don't think the loopback is intended for the other way around. All right, so we have a question. How do you save the quick controls parameters so that's the same every time you open that plugin? All right, so let's come over here. I'll just open up a quick plugin. Let's go to inserts. All right, so let's say I want to go to vocoder plugin here. So I want it to come over here. So I haven't done anything with this. So I'll just click on learn. So let's say we'll learn that particular function. Let's click here. Let's say we'll learn this function. Click on this one. We'll move this knob. And then we'll come over here. I want this to be this parameter. I want this to be this parameter. All right, so now when we come over here, we've learned those particular settings. All right, so now that so we'll just come and say, okay, we see slider 1. I will move kind of the compand control. Let's move the transpose and the tune. So I'm going to open up a new project. And let's add an audio track. so we'll open up kind of our quick controls, and we see that those are preserved. So once you open up the plugin, just open up the quick controls, and those will stick between different projects. So that way those 8 quick controls are defined for that plugin in whichever project that plugin is in. All right, so we see from Tiago, question, shouldn't track versions work for VariAudio too? When I create a new version from an original file and do VariAudio new version, these changes alter the previous version too. So if you're duplicating, let's say if we're doing VariAudio on a particular track, okay, so it's not necessarily the track version, but when you've done the VariAudio editing, so let's say if we're here and we do the VariAudio editing, so just double click here and we go to VariAudio. So it's based on the file itself, not necessarily the track, but the file itself. So let's say I move, we come to the start here. All right, so I want to take like these notes and move them all to the same pitch, so now if I just say, let's do duplicate version, when I come over here, it's the same exact file. So what you would need to do is to come over and let's say before we do our edits here is I'm going to do a new version, and let's say I duplicate this version, because again, this VariAudio editing is at the same level. So what I'm going to do is just to come over to audio, to bounce selection, and we'll replace. So now these are 2 separate distinct audio files. So now when I do VariAudio editing on this version, so let's say I'll just move all these nodes up. All right, and I go to a different file on a different track version, and we do our VariAudio editing here, that these will be different and distinct, because again, you're dealing with the same audio file, but if you render that file, it will be 2 separate files. So that way the same audio file isn't being processed just in 2 different versions. So before you do editing, just make render it as a separate file, and then you could just simply have independent versions for editing, and you could just immediately go back from a tuned vocal to an untuned vocal. All right, so we see question in the edit channel setting window and playback mode. What are those 2 EQ analyzers showing? EQ analyzer, inside analyzer. So I think if we come over here, let's say I wanted to take all right, and I'll just revert this so it's less annoying. Okay, so I want to look at, let's say, my bass track. So I'm going to compare the audio. So let's come over here, and I'm going to select my different tracks. So I'm going to take my snare top track. So if I click here, I can now EQ my snare. And we see that my snare goes into the foreground with my snare. And if I wanted to EQ my bass, I could just come So you could just kind of go back and forth if you want to solo the snare or solo the bass. You could just go ahead and do that as well. So you could just navigate between seeing the visualization of the two tracks. So again, we'll just take that. And you could adjust the transparency between them if you wanted to, and just take two tracks that are kind of clashing against each other and allow you to EQ them so that they're not clashing. All right, so we see Tiago just has a feature request. In Very Audio, I wish to edit volume dynamics in a gradual, smooth way. For example, crescendo or decrescendo in long notes without having to create segments. So I think, we want it to be able to take, and I probably, fought for this in Very Audio, so that if you were doing, like while you're here kind of at the granular level, if one note or frequency or let's say a consonant was really loud, that, we could just come over here and adjust, the volume. So we could just say, okay, I wanted to just be able to adjust the volume. It's not really intended to be for, automation handling, because, there's a lot of information here. And I think that as you work with this, if you're looking at kind of the segments, it could be really easy to confuse the pitch segmentation with audio volume automation. So I think that would be more confusing. I personally, and I understand if you disagree, but if you had like one consonant that rung out, or this note was just hit too hard while you're tuning, that you could adjust the volume of the segment. But I think if you wanted to have automation, I think it makes more sense to do it either, using automation for that, because what we're primarily focusing on here is the pitch segmentation. What we want to see is where the pitch is going between each of the segments. Like, I don't go into Very Audio to do audio automation, but if I need to do a quick correction, it's there. Like, I wouldn't go into my automation lane to do pitch correction. So I think, I'll mention it, but I think that the intention is, to keep those two separate, because when you have kind of the same representation, and here the primary representation that you want to see, or that I want to see, is going to be the pitch and not the level. So that's why I would still not want, personally, I wouldn't want to do my volume automation here. I would want to do it in my automation sources, where I could see that against every single part, and I could see automation on all tracks, whether it's monophonic or polyphonic, and in the same manner. Okay. All right, so we see, thanks, Greg. I put the question differently. Can Cubase key commands be imported from the previous version? So yeah, all you need to do, if it's, I'm not sure if it's, all the key commands are kind of compatible since earlier versions, going back to 2000 or 2001. But if you go to your key commands and you had a key command file here and you wanted to import that, so generally if you save it as a preset in the earlier version, it will show up here. You could also copy it, and it's going to be kind of different locations, but let's say if we come over to On a Mac, let's say if we go to the library and let's go to preferences. So let's just take a look at my preferences here. Let's see. And let's go to Cubase. I think we'll see them in sorry, I'll just make this larger so it's easier to see. All right, so let's go to Cubase 12. And then there's the key commands XML file, so you could copy that over. But if you get a presets to key commands, you could also just like the one I just made today, just shows up there. So you could copy it from the Cubase 12 or Cubase 11 to Cubase 12 or Cubase 10 to Cubase 12, just put it into the same folder. If you're on Windows, you would just access it from, so let's go to desktop and let me just find the there's kind of a Cubase Windows setting. So if you're on Windows, you could just go to your Start menu and go to the User Settings Data folder, and then you'll see that for Cubase 12, Cubase 11. Alternatively, you could just, in your Cubase 11, go to your Edit menu and choose Profile Manager and export from Cubase 11 and import into Cubase 12 your profile. All right, so we have Little Wing Audio just saying hello. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see Patrick asks, hi Greg, does QLink work on third-party plugins, adding same plugin in 3 tracks? Can I make changes? So yeah. So let's say I want to, we'll add 3 tracks here. All right, so we have audio 1, 2, 3. Let's get to the mix console. We'll see audio 1, 2, 3 right here. So I want to add, let's say, the third-party plugin. So it doesn't matter. I'm going to activate QLink. Let's put on the vocoder plugin. And I want to make changes in the plugin. So let's come over here. So now we'll deactivate QLink and we come to this EQ. We can see that all the parameters are the same for the plugin. So yeah, the QLink works for not only Steinberg plugins, but for all plugins, third party as well. Great to see you on, Patrick. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so Nick has to head off early, so look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, Nick. Thanks for joining us today, spending some of your evening with us. All right, so we see from Little Wing Audio, Greg, the chord analysis feature. Can I import a segment of a chord progression from a recorded song and get the chords? So if you kind of know what the chords are, if you have like a part of a song, and let's say I'll add a chord track here. I'll activate the project first, that will help. All right, so all I had to do is just take like an audio file or a MIDI file. I'll just drag it to the chord track and it's going to do It's magic right here. And now we have kind of our chord track kind of automatically laid out for us right there. So. Okay, so Patrick asks, Greg, while I was working with synth, my MIDI and synth is receiving signal and I've already recorded, but next day when I open the project, I can't hear the playback, but it's receiving signal. How to solve? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. So I'll just do new, let's go to particular project. Okay, so let's come over here. So let's say if I have this instrument loaded, I can play it. Now, if it's not, so let's say, make sure one that when you have the track selected here, it could be just go to my track control settings. Sorry. Okay, so now, as soon as you have the, if you don't have MIDI routed to, you don't have that on, I'm just going to reread the question. So it's receiving signal. All right, but, and I've already recorded, but next day when I open the project, I can't hear any playback, but it's receiving signal. How to solve? See if, usually you don't see this with instruments, but maybe, so I'm not sure if it's, see if you get the same results. So if you hit like Alt or Option plus the letter K, you get the virtual keyboard, and see if it plays back with the virtual keyboard, as opposed to, just working, so see if that is working with the virtual keyboard and see if it's a MIDI communication problem. Also see if, where your MIDI volume is on the track. So if your MIDI volume is down, you might be receiving MIDI data, but if the MIDI volume or CC7 is down, so if you look at it and go to your main volume controllers, it could be that, if these are down, like it's there very soft. So if you accidentally wrote in MIDI CC7, you may not actually hear it until. So, try that as well. And if you want to send me share a part with me where it's not working, I'd be happy to take a look at it. All right, so we see Patrick just says thumbnail for the live stream looks great. Who did this? Congratulations. So is the clever people at Steinberg. So I can't get any credit. So the marketing people at Steinberg and the PR people. So they deserve all the kudos. But we'll make sure we pass it on to them. All right, so Soren says, if I'm dreaming of a white cloud, Cubase settles is a very sweet spot for beginner music producers. An extremely fun thing would be if Yamaha emptied its keyboards, songs, arrangements into Cubase. So, sometimes if you do that, then people may not buy as many keyboards. But, who knows what will come in the future. So. All right, so we see Sable Winter says, thanks, Greg, and all these MIDI-related tips. Conversation is really sweet. Hit points, threshold, wonderful. So, great. And Gareth adds, marvelous. All right. All right, so my chat field just moved on me. All right, so I think I'm back to where I was roughly. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Royal Wooten Bassett. Glad you can make it today. Always wonderful to have you on. All right, so we see Little Wing Audio just says Windows 11 Professional does not like drivers that are not signed by Microsoft, and unsigned drivers interfere with the core isolation. So. Okay, so we see Andrew just asked a follow-up question to whether or not audio visualizers intended for aesthetic purposes or Trap Nation visualizer useful for analyzing bass content. I'm not really that familiar with them, so I'm not sure if they're if they give you a different perspective on it, but I'm not sure if it shows you anything that's kind of audibly usable, or just kind of maybe it allows you to perceive the music differently. So, and that sometimes that's not a bad thing in a mix. All right, wonderful to see Lawrence Koch from Rhode Island. Glad you can make it today. Sorry for answering your questions on faxing last live stream. All right, so we have Abbas checking in from Kuwait. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see that Tiago's that he had the voices recorded separately, each singer in the single recording session, no mic bleeding. Yeah, I mean, if you have some files, I'd be happy to kind of share them and see if they could, adjust the algorithm. But sometimes depending on the material, it's obviously going to work with more transients. If it's like a lot of kind of more pad like vocal parts, it may not be as effective. All right, so Tiago says thanks for the very audio and track version tip. All right, so we see from Gareth. He says that I always recommend soloing the bass permanently for the whole song. But Gareth asks, has the supervision issue of adopting the color of the track been fixed? All right, so let's say I'm on this track and we're just playing some drums here. And I'll just put this back into musical mode. And all right, so now I'm going to put a supervision on this particular track. So let's come over to inserts and go to our analyzer supervision. So when we do this, it's going to assume the track color. But I think a lot of them, if we go into like the settings here, that you could have scale or track color. So if you want to see like the track color, kind of use that as the basis. So let's say if I switch this track color to more of a blue or more of a red. But again, once you click on the little window here, you can see that you can colorize based on track or based on scale. So let me know if that's what you're talking about. If that is, then you could be one mouse click away from happiness. All right, so you see, maybe I misunderstood a question about the edit channel thing. So it says my EQ analyzer is showing light blue aliaser that's peak value. Inside dark blue analyzer is showing RMS or compression value. So I think it's just going to be RMS, but let's go ahead and just take a look. So let's come over here to our channel EQ. So I think if we just just adjust the tempo down here. So, but when kind of looking at it, and you could show FFT, pre-EQ, or we could just hold. So this way you could show the peaks if the hold is enabled. So maybe that's what you have activated, and if you go to the settings of the EQ, so maybe that's what you're seeing is kind of the peaks. So let me know if that's kind of what you're referring to with that. All right, Gareth has shared his insightful keyboard shortcut that he uses L as his key command for quick link. So if anyone is looking for a suggestion for the quick link key command, that's Gareth's recommendation. All right. Okay. Reading through comments. Thanks for all the great comments. All right, so we see Martin just asks, hi, is it possible to create a fader to control MIDI CCs? So if you want to create a fader in software, so if you wanted to actually kind of just write MIDI CCs on a particular track, one of the things you could do is if you get to the MIDI inserts, there is kind of a MIDI control. So if you say, okay, I just wanted to write modulation, you could use it's not necessarily like a fader, you could just come over here and use a mouse scroll wheel, and that could write CC, so it's not a fader. If you really wanted to be very inclined, we could go into this is maybe a left-handed approach to it, but let's go to not that window, but let's go to the MIDI device panel. So you could come over here and let's go to more options, and let's go to the MIDI device manager, and here you could let's go just create a new device. All right, so all right, so let's install device. We'll define new, and you can say, okay, I want it to come here. We'll just call it MIDI general. You could, and so now we could come over here, open a device, and then you could create. Let's go to device, and let's add a panel. So I want it to be inspector size, and then we could say, okay, I want to first have this, let's choose background. Let's come over here and, all right, I'm going to, all right, so let's go to our panel, and then we'll go to faders. So now I want this fader, and I want to create this fader, and this fader I could have it spit out modulation if you want. All right, so once we have that done, you could go to different, you could load that up as a device panel and be able to, come over here, and you could have faders that do that. I mean, there's a zillion controllers that have faders. I'm not sure if you want faders to just transmit MIDI CC or if you want software faders that do that, but you can do it in a device panel. Let's take a look at, there might be another MIDI insert that you could use. So let's just say if we go to track control. So here, like if you have an XG device or GS device, it doesn't allow you right to. So you could change between like different XG devices for that. But really there's a number, anything that spits out MIDI CC, you could remap using, so even if you have just a modulation wheel, you could go to the input transformer, and at that point, just say, okay, my MIDI CC1, I want to transmit this to, so when I go to, let's say, my MIDI monitor on this, I have MIDI CC1, and if I wanted to take that CC into and turn it into channel 12, like into CC11, like say, let's take type is equal to controller, and then I want to take value 1 of that controller. And since modulation is CC1, I want to transmit CC11. I'm just going to come over here and we say add 10. So now when I move my modulation wheel on my keyboard controller, it's automatically controlling CC11. You could change that to any value to get to any other CC. So it's, usually it's, there's so many things in hardware that people have that will transmit MIDI CC data easily. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay. Okay. All right, so we see shortcut for re-record while tracking guitars. Okay, so if you're not familiar with what re-record does, this is kind of a cool feature. So a lot of times when people are recording, so let's say I want to just come over here and I'm going to set a punch in and let's say a punch out point here. And I want to do my guitar part, and let's say I record something and I mess up. So I hit stop, I often hit undo, and then I go back and hit record again. So there is a function when we go to our audio recording called, let's go to, we'll come right over here and we will choose, let me just see, that's our MIDI. All right. All right, so now we have this re-record mode. All right, so if I want it to, now when I'm in re-record mode, I hit record. All right, and let's say I hit record again. It just immediately goes right back, undoes that, and kind of takes care of that. So let's look at a keyboard shortcut to turn on and off re-record mode. So let's come over here to edit to key command, and let's go to all right, so I think it's going to be under maybe transport. All right, I'm just going to check this the absolute spelling. So re-record, okay. All right, so let's see if we could. Okay, so let's come over to key commands again. All right, let's start from top here, see if there's key command for this. So it looks like audio record mode. So let's go ahead and so maybe it's I set it to Command Option Shift A. So let me see. So if we come let me just look under punch, in and out. So there may not be a key command specifically for that, but maybe it's just like a toggle. Yeah, so there may not be a keyboard shortcut for that, but you could always just see if I come here. Yeah, so you might just have to set it. So sorry about that. I'll pass that along as a potentially missing keyboard shortcut. All right, wake up my computer. All right, so we have Roland Klein, just says hi from Kalmar, Sweden. Thanks for joining us. All right, see Gareth has a dash. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you have a great weekend. Okay, so we see Roger just ask, hi Greg, I've glued several vents to a part. Then I like to stretch the glued drum part to the double length by mouse and stretch the sound, and the sound should transpose like in tape mode. Can you show it, please? Okay, so let me just create this. Okay, we'll put it all on one track. All right, I'm going to separate these. Let's get a function. Okay, so there's glued several vents to a part, and I want to stretch the glued drum part to double length by mouse. Okay, so let's glue all of these together. Okay, when we do this, it turns it from an event into a part. Okay, so let's go into the part editor. Okay, so it says, then I like to stretch the glue drum part to double length by mouse, and sound should down transpose. So let's say we listen. All right, so before I glue it together, I'm going to just take all these off of musical mode. And so we're not dealing with that. Let's set a spacer. Okay, so okay, so now we're going to glue all these together. Okay. All right, and let's say he wants to stretch it, so let's say as it's playing. All right, so let's go ahead and switch my sizing mode. Sizing implies time stretch. All right, but he wants the pitch to change as well. So I'm going to go into my pool window, and let's get to audio, and then I want to set all of these to, let's say, musical mode, and I want to set the algorithm here to elastic tape. Okay, so now that let's say we take this, and I'm going to speed it up here. We'll see if the pitch now changes. So you might have to, Roger, if I'm understanding correctly, go into the pool window and then set the algorithm here under algorithm to a tape, and then as you adjust the tempo, as you stretch, that the files will slow down in pitch or speed up if it's faster. So now, so let me know if that's what you're trying to do, Roger, and thanks for joining us on the live stream today. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios. I'm likely missing it, but is there a tool within Cubase Nuendo to rotate/balance phase on tracks similar to Isotope's phase within RX? So a lot of times, let's say if I had a particular, so I'm not sure if you're doing like phase correction against, I'm not familiar with that particular tool. So let's just say I'll play this one. All right, so say if I wanted to, so we can flip the phase directly on the project window here. And let me just go ahead and duplicate this track. I'll split it into 2 monos here quickly. So let's go to convert tracks. I'm going to select the track. You know, an easy way to do this is, let me just, is just when you're kind of looking at the file. So I'm not sure if it's like gradually allows you to adjust. So let's say if I'm here and I wanted to invert the phase or the polarity, we could do that. But, it could be just maybe more of a graphic way of slightly shifting. So let's say if I wanted to switch my main timeline here to, let's say samples, and we zoom in, you could also just, while it's not graphical, you could just say, okay, I want to take this selected one and adjust the start position by samples. And that's in essence just kind of altering the phase. So at the highest resolution that you could work with. So, you might be able to just do that without having to have a special plugin to do that, Jay. Let me know if it's like a plugin that has varying levels of phase as opposed to switching the polarity of it. All right, so you see Gareth is happy that you could switch off, I think, the colors from inside of Supervision. So that's his revelation of the day. So John Barry says Supervision has to be another candidate for the lower zone, maybe next upgrade, Charlie Brown. So I like to see Supervision on a full screen and not limited to the lower zone. So I've seen a lot of people just get a dedicated monitor just for Supervision. I think it's like well worth it just to have the like 1 or 2 instances of Supervision showing everything. It's so useful. All right. So we have a question from Val Yu. It says, on what should I set Supervision RMS loudness meter? The DIN format, international, or just Germany, Austria? So, there's different delivery formats for that. So let me just switch to a different project here just so. So often when you see some of the different settings, they might be kind of more inclined for, so let's come over, say, to Supervision here. All right, so and I'll just make sure. So the RMS loudness meter, so let's come over here. So I'm not sure if it's with so I think, for like this level, let me just see if this is, so let's see if this is maybe where you're thinking of, or if it's going to be on. right, let me just make sure I have the right meter. So the RMS loudness meter, so let's... All right, so the loudness, this one's going to be just on, let me just go, if we set it maybe on the VU meter, let's check, see if this is where you get, or if it's probably, let me see, make sure. All right, so here, if it's like on the VU meter, you know, I usually use VU dBFS, you know. A lot of the like DIN, Nordic, you know, some of these are like specifically, I think, for international broadcasting. So if you're not really worried about that, I would definitely use kind of just normal, you know, digital scale, or like on a VU meter, like, you know, dB full scale. So that will kind of give you. So just because you live in Austria doesn't mean you should use the DIN scale, just because a broadcast organization within a country is using that as a particular standard. So Gareth K just says, one mouse click away from happiness. You made my weekend, Greg. So Jazz Dude also thinks supervision is great on a separate monitor. All right, my Chatfield just jumped, and Gareth uses supervision on a holographic projector just to make it special. So you see our foobar 2000 components by Waymock Real. If it is, my page is on Fanon Wiki will get deleted, right? So I don't know much about I don't know much about that. If you want to email me some details and like maybe a link to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it. All right. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios. Is it possible to use one set of control surfaces for single tracks on the mixer and a separate one designed to be used exclusively for group bus tracks? So yeah, you could definitely have, you know, like the track assignments fixed in different control surfaces. So that's pretty common. So that you could, you know, sometimes it's a different control surface layer. So yeah, you could definitely, you know, split up your control surface that way. Okay, reading through more comments. All right, we see the cube has to take off, so thanks for joining us today. All right, so wonderful to see Luca back. So from Dresden, Germany. Hope you're doing well. So wonderful to have you back. All right, we see Michael Pierce has made it. All right. See, Michael Pierce is going to Imstafesta in London tomorrow. Yeah, I wish I could be there. My friend Ray, who I've known for 31 years or so, actually interviewed me for my job at Steinberg way back when. He's the guy who runs that. So if you see Ray Williams, tell him Greg Undo said hi. All right. All right, so we see Michael Pierce just says there's 122 likes. Thank you so much, everyone. The value just says just loves watching VUs, very satisfying. So it's all vintage. All right, so I'm going to go to some of we had a couple questions mailed in, or just clarifications from last time. So let me go to this. So one of the questions we had was, how to kind of work with something like an Alberti sequence where we have, an arpeggiator going on the low hand, like on lower notes, and like maybe, not affecting higher notes. And if there's a way of doing that in Cubase. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So there's a way we could do it in Hallian Sonic when I started kind of playing around with it a little bit. So let's go ahead and open up Hallian Sonic, and it's part of the Flex Phraser. So I will just... All right, so what I could do is let me just... All right, so when I play, let's say, a chord in the lower, I wanted the lower notes here to arpeggiate automatically and not arpeggiate like maybe above C3. So let's take a look at how we could do that using Hallian Sonic 7. Again, this is free for Cubase users. So we're going to go to, let's get to Edit, Program, and then we're going to go to the Flex P here. And I want to set this up, and we'll just do, and I think Alberti's technically do, like if you're holding like 1-3-5, it goes 1-3-5-3-5, 1-3-5-3-5, But I'm just gonna kind of alternate here, and there's different patterns that we could use. So if I just want to come over here, just say, okay, I want to do... All right, so let's say I want to take that. I'm just going to slow down tempo a bit. All right, so I want to limit this arpeggiator to only go up to B2. So any note above B2, once we hit this, and if I switch it to B2, so now I could play chords here, and you can see just looking at the keyboard. And now when I hold down a chord in my left hand, so this way you could experiment and have, just at arpeggios at a certain point and not affect other parts. So you can go all Mozart on people. All right, another question we had was how to trigger a musical phrase, like just a, like a MIDI phrase from MIDI notes. So let's take a look at that. And I was kind of thinking about this after doing the live stream of an approach for this, and came up with one that will probably work better than kind of staggering different MIDI plugins. So what we're going to do in this is we have, let's say, our Rhodes piano, and I just kind of dragged over. So we have this particular piano, and what I did is I loaded up an instance of Groove Agent, and I actually just loaded up a kit and then turned the volume down. But on the pattern pads, I actually have different phrases. So I had phrases that were just kind of dragged into let's say from the project window. So I'll come over here and say I wanted to go to keyboard, and let's say electric piano. So I'm going to drag this particular phrase over. So once it's in my project window, I could take the event from the project window and drag it onto a pattern pad. So what I've done is I've set up Groove Agent. I turned the volume down, and it seems to only work. And I haven't experimented to find out if if there's some workaround. But I just loaded up a kit and then turned the volume down on it. So instead of playing a drum pattern, what we could do is this Rhodes patch is now, once we have activated this, I have the Omni turned off, and I choose Groove Agent as the input. So I'm going to transpose my keyboard down. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to send a MIDI note to Groove Agent. And I'll just turn on my MIDI monitor here so you could just see. And we'll clear this. Okay, so now when I hit this note, I'm going to turn both of the tracks on for recording. So I hit the C sharp, the G sharp 1 note here. Then I hit the next note, an A, that triggers this pad. So really all I had to do now is just hit this into record. So we'll start with G sharp 1. So I'm going to record onto both tracks. So we're using the patterns here in Groove Agent to actually serve as kind of a catalyst to trigger a MIDI phrase on the Rhodes patch. So I'll just come here, hit play, and so the single note here is just triggering that phrase. I'm going to take it out of cycle, record. It'll just repeat that pattern. I'm just going to hold down the note, and it'll just keep repeating that particular pattern. So now the single note inside of Groove Agent is triggering this phrase, these patterns. These patterns are set as the MIDI input. So Groove Agent is taking the patterns as the MIDI input and then feeding it directly into this part. So I could play all these complex parts by just playing one simple note, or even an electronic drum kit will be able to trigger all those particular notes. So all right, let's move back to our live questions. Thanks for everyone for wonderful questions that have been sent in. Let's go ahead and take a quick look. All right. See Jazz Dude talking about VUs, just saying he was so happy to have accurate meters when LEDs were introduced in the late 70s. So, yeah. All right, so we see what would be the pros and cons of using Groove Agent versus a sampler track for using one-shot 808s for bass lines in hip-hop music. So I think one of the things that Groove Agent would be good at, is, there's a lot of different legato modes that could be really advantageous for, for working on different slides and stuff that you could do in the sampler track. That's not. So let's go ahead and take a look. I think I may have a project show this. So once I have, so say I have a, I want to drag this particular sample into my sampler control. So I'm just going to drag it in. And now when we come over, we just get it in the right octave. All right, and let me just... All right, so say I'm kind of playing this. So there's kind of some unique, in the sampler track, there are some cool things that you could do with gliding. So once we put this into monophonic mode, so we put it, let's say, in one shot mode, but we'll put it into monophonic mode. We could just kind of come over here and do different, so let's say we go to our pitch tab. So if I wanted to set a glide amount, or if we wanted to do even stuff where it wouldn't re-trigger. So it's really cool for that type of stuff. But one of the things that might be a little easier to do sometimes, we could have like LFOs. So if we wanted to just kind of change our pitch, but I also like kind of some of the pitch envelopes that we get in Groove Agent. So I'm going to take this and we'll open it in an instance of Groove Agent. So once I'm in, like this particular, and let me just find what key, put it on, so C3. All right, so once I'm here, some of the cool things you can do in Groove Agent is, one, you could have multiple samples kind of stacked together. But if we go to pitch, and at this point, you can go to your envelope, and you could just say, okay, I want, then as soon as you release, you could just kind of come right over here and just say, and let's say as soon as we release, we could just say. So some of the pitch envelope stuff could be advantageous. I think it's a little easier to do in Groove Agent, and having, more than one sound, being able to have a whole set of different kits and multiple outputs. Whereas, if you want just a single sample, that's when the sampler track could really excel. And I think the legato modes are really good in the sampler track. And maybe some of the pitch editing and more flexibility is, found within the Groove Agent. So. All right, so we have Rude Screen just saying he's late to the party, but we're glad that you can make it. If you're late, all you have to do is hit the like button. All right. See, Jazz Dude just says Groove Agent is like a sampler. It's dressed like a drum machine. So. Okay. See, where just John Koskins asking if the VU meters in Cubase click and bend when they slam into the stops and go crazy with a magnet. So we'll have to get the magnet VST plugin and put that in. So. All right. All right, so we see John Barry likes the Alberti type solution. So, but yeah, you could definitely use that. All right, you see Gerald Ely says, hey, isn't that the chord Greg uses for instruction videos? So you probably see a lot of the same. I have kind of a whole tutorials, where I make particular projects to show off different functions. So it could be. All right, wonderful to see Randy Leon. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we see, how do you deal with editing large projects, say 50 plus stems in different groups at once? So it's not so bad to do. It's pretty straightforward. Having it organized is always an important component. So we'll just take kind of a larger project here. So it's really easy to assign, the tracks to different stems. But, here's probably, a pretty large session. So we could just have like folders. So we can say, like, here we can see, like congas, or bass parts, keyboards, piano, guitars. We could have our VST instruments. We could have group tracks. So we could go from here, and then you could also just, come right over here. Okay, I want to see all my drums. And one of the cool things is we could say, okay, I really like this. I want to only see my drums. So I'm going to hold down Shift and double click. And at this point, I could say, okay, I want to see my drums and my markers. And we could save this as visibility. So I'll go to my configurations here. We'll add configurations, and I'll say drums. So now I want to see all tracks. So I can come right over here. I want to see all tracks in the project. So, or if I want to see all of just my piano and keys, I'll come here, hold down Shift. Now let's add a configuration. So now I can say, let's go to drums. I want to go to my keys. I want to see vocals. So anything that you want to just kind of see, you could just have these different configurations. So this way you could, each of these groups, each of these folders, you could send to groups if you want or not. They're completely independent, but this way you could see exactly what you want and manage large projects using folders and nested folders within other folders. So it's really easy to do and organize in Cubase. Okay. And if you want to take like a number of tracks, let's say we go to our drums group here, and you're going to send all these to a group, all you have to do is select, right click, and add a group channel or effects channel to selected tracks. Just that easy. See, Best Korean Jesus just says, wow, official thumbnail looks fresh, so it's great. It seems well received, so I never want to have my picture and stuff, but I'm glad that people like it. So, all right, Sable Winter says, so many features in Cubase Pro can make a body feel quite puny. So, see, John Costigan says that's a great time saver. Okay, let's see if there's any. All right, so some more questions? All right. Best Green Jesus is a great quote. He says, 3 types of people: those who see when shown, and those who do not see. That's good. I'll have to quote you on that. All right, we have a couple minutes left. Let's see how I think we're maybe out of questions. We'll see if there's any other quick questions that sneak in. Thank you for all the wonderful questions, and I appreciate everyone spending part of their morning, evening, afternoon with us, learning about Cubase. All right, so John Costigan's going to unbend his view meters. All right, we'll see if there's any others. We want to wish everyone a happy and safe weekend, and everyone stay healthy so we can be back together on Tuesday. We see Best Green Jesus says this quote is from Leonardo da Vinci. I'll give you attribution for it. So. Okay, so we see I've been editing an entire set list of playback stems. I'm looking for workflow tips working on D+ size stuff. So we'll show you one thing you could do. So say if you have like a long stem, then I'll just use kind of maybe a shorter example, but I think you'll be able to get the point. So let's say this was a long recording. So I'm going to just activate this real quick, make sure we don't run over on time. Okay, so I'm going to just activate a particular, so let's say you have like one long contiguous recording. I'm going to add just a marker track here. And let's say this is, song 1. So I'm going to hold down. So I'm going to add, let's say, a cycle marker, and then this is song 2. So we add a cycle marker here. Let me just hit the letter P, and then we'll add cycle marker, song 3, cycle marker. So set cycle markers if you have like a long project around each of the pieces. And then what you're able to do is just to come over here, and if you wanted to export, and I'll just do one of these just for time's sake. So right now we have one long contiguous recording, so I wanted to now come over here and say let's export audio mix down, and I wanted to do my stems, so let's do multiple. So I want to take my audio channels and let's do by cycle markers, and I'll just do 1 and 2, and we'll create new audio tracks just to show this, and we'll go export. All right, let me choose a new naming scheme. All right, so what this will do is take like my first area of cycle markers, and we can put this into new projects, but each of them will automatically be broken down into separate files. So with that, we are out of time. I want to thank everyone for being a part of the live stream. We'll see everyone back on Tuesday, and we look forward to seeing you back, and hope that everyone has a wonderful, safe weekend. Take care, and we'll see you back on Tuesday. Thank you.